Our brutally honest review of Lancer. Is it a Gundam lover's dream or too tough to follow?
It's never straightforward.
Over the past month or so, I had the chance to jump into the Lancer RPG, the mech RPG originally released in 2019 and updated in 2024. Lancer was originally created by Miguel Lopez and Tom Bloom, the latter of whom is best known as the creator of the fantastic Kill 6 Billion Demons webcomic. Now, before we dive into this ambitious RPG, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons to help grow our new independent RPG and fantasy news channel. In Lancer, players pilot mech suits through sit reps, missions with firm objectives beyond just killing opponents. Objectives that I've played through include escorting a vehicle across a map full of hostiles, trying to survive waves of enemies for a number of rounds, or holding more objective zones than your opponent. Lancer uses a hex map and has a robust set of rules dictating things like cover, how to climb on top of various kinds of buildings and terrain, and line of sight. Now, there are two distinct systems within Lancer, a very robust combat system that relies mainly on D20 checks, and a narrative-focused system for out-of-combat role-playing. The combat is absolutely fantastic, with plenty of choices on a turn. Players can always move on their turn, plus take either 2 quick actions or 1 full action. Quick actions include boosting for extra movement or firing 1 mount's worth of weaponry, while full actions include using a super heavy weapon or letting multiple weapons rip at opponents. You can also take tech attacks that seek to hack into enemy mechs or scan them to reveal critical information about what they can do. Players also have the option to do a overdrive, which allows them to take an additional quick action, but at the cost of some heat, and we'll cover what heat is later. Now, another wrinkle to combat is a Mex HP. While players lose HP whenever they're hit by an attack, they functionally have several HP bars. Whenever a player's HP is reduced to 0, they become structured and roll to see whether they lose a system or a weapon mount. It's an interesting way to reflect combat damage, with players making tough choices over the course of a mission as their systems go offline. Now, in addition to HP, mechs also have heat to deal with, which is created by both enemy effects and some player choices like the boost that I mentioned earlier. If a mech overheats, they run the risk of melting down or becoming temporarily exposed, which causes their suit to take double damage when they're hit with an attack. While heat is generally a negative stat, some mechs have abilities that only activate while at a high heat level. Players don't earn levels in the traditional sense in Lancer, they earn licenses instead. Initially, players start with a standard mech and a limited choice of weapon loadouts and options. As players advance, they can upgrade their mechs with new licenses, unlocking new weapons and systems. Players also have core talents which allow them to further customize their playstyles, which allow them to specialize in certain kinds of actions or strategies. For instance, I chose talents that focused on close quarter combat and then picked a license that let me add a flamethrower as a main weapon. Because sit reps don't necessarily involve wiping out enemies, combat feels much more tactical than a standard TTRPG game like Dungeons and Dragons. While I picked a combat-focused mech, another player took a hacker build that scans foes and disables them, and another player took a mech that's meant to absorb damage and wipe out foes with 1 swing of their super heavy sword. A lot of the strategy comes from figuring out how to utilize different players' talents in various situations. In my case, does my flamethrower mech team up with the long-range specialist or the hacker while trying to clear objectives? It varies from situation to situation. Now, a large chunk of Lancer's core rulebook digs into the various kinds of licenses that players can take. That can feel really overwhelming, especially if you're trying to figure out how to optimize your build or figure out a specific kind of build that fits in with your preferred method of fighting. It also feels a little bit like dangling a carrot in front of players, since your base builds are very generic compared to the more exotic mechs that are out there, and there are a lot of exotic mechs. Luckily, there's a dedicated community of Lancer players and fans that should help provide a lot of resources to help newcomers out. The Lancer Reddit, in my case, was a big help. My only other real criticism is that the combat system, while robust, has some weird holes in it. A lot of this can be solved with common sense rulings, but the cover and line of sights rules probably deserve a few more examples within the rulebook itself, especially when dealing with how terrain in multi-level combat works. This is also a game that feels very much made for a VTT. as maps involve a ton of buildings and various sized cover that's just not really feasible without either a lot of terrain already on hand or a lot of imagination. Now, one final shout out, the artwork in Lancer is absolutely amazing. Mastiff Press recruited an army of popular indie comics artists and creators to contribute artwork for the book. Not only are the mechs just absolutely bonkers to look at, the artwork in general is just a treat to look at and enjoy. While Lancer might feel a little bit overwhelming at first, my playgroup was able to understand most of the nuances of combat after a few play sessions. If you're looking to jump into a game of Lancer, I'd recommend either playing a game with a veteran of Lancer or doing a bit of research before digging in. This is definitely a game that sci-fi fans should check out, especially if you're an EVA or Gundam fan. So, have you given Lancer a shot? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Above the Table.